Don't fuck up, don't fuck yourself. Hi, everybody. That was weird. Don't fuck up and don't fuck. How do you want me to say it? Don't fuck up and don't fuck yourself. Yeah, that sounds fine. This one's a somber one. It's just me. And I'm going to be reading you a story, which you've already seen, The Sin Eaters. And you're probably wondering to yourself, dear self, what exactly are the Sin Eaters? Dear listener, I will get to that. But I ran across this story. I wanted to give you a little backstory. I ran across this story, and even though it's spring has sprung and we're coming into June almost, we're halfway through May, and everything's beautiful. And, sometimes, stories just get you. And it's been raining in Baltimore for 35 years at this point. And, everything's kind of overcast and gray, and we got the whole Edgar Allan Poe thing. So everything's a little goofy, loosey-goosey here anyway. Spooky ooky wise. And this caught me, and it seems like a thing that I would read during Halloween, but to be honest, it's a shortish story, as you've seen. This episode's probably not going to be more than 20 minutes long. So I decided to just throw it in on my story time, and I hope you guys are enjoying these little short guys that I'm putting in between, because I just got no place for them, but I like the stories and how they, sort of show food in different ways, and where normally it's not like, oh, well, here's a thing about lettuce. This is more lived in and more of a history thing that I enjoy that actually happened within the confines of real people's lives. Not that, lettuce isn't real, but, or is it? Anyway, but, I love just these weird stories about things that happened in the past that have either tangential or real ramifications on the food we eat today. This doesn't, but it's still a really cool story. And, let's get into it. So, I came across a story and I instantly was like, holy shit, this is so weird. And I hope they make it into a movie. And they've made a few movies, looking into this, I tend to go down rabbit holes. There's a movie with, what's his name? It's called The Order with Heath Ledger, which is weird because Heath Ledger's in it. And then two of the other people from the greatest movie ever, A Knight's Tale, are also in it. So if you want to watch the trailer for that, I highly recommend it. I've never seen this movie and I think I'm going to watch it. And then there was another movie from 2 years ago called The Sin Eaters. And that looked really fucking weird, about a lady who got in a car accident and she got bolts put on her mouth like fucking Kanye West. And then, I don't know, it was weird. There's a lot of Sin Eater movie titles, because it's a pretty fucking rad name for a movie, right? The Sin Eaters. So I'm going to have to watch a couple of these movies. It looks like some of them look really bad, and there's nothing I like more than a fucking bad horror movie. So yeah, let's start talking about this, the history and the strangeness of medieval sin eaters. By the way, what I'm, my text for this basically is taken from, a thing by a writer named Carl Seaver, from, the History Channel. Christianity has never been a homogeneous religion with clearly defined ideas and beliefs. When it emerged in the late 1st and 2nd centuries AD, it was essentially a schismatic branch of Judaism. Then it adopted elements of a Hellenic polytheist religion to become more popular throughout the Roman Empire. By the 4th century AD, it was emerging throughout Europe, North Africa, and the Levant as a power, but its adherents were violent zealots who went around destroying pagan, quote-unquote, temples. Moreover, there were already differences between the branches of Christianity, with Arianism becoming a significant subset of Christianity. But despite its early rejection of pagan superstitions, Christianity remained a religion with many pagan beliefs embedded in it. Magic and the belief in the supernatural were staples of Christian belief down to the advent of the scientific revolution in the early modern period. And one of the most curious elements of this were the so-called sin eaters. and the prevalence in Europe up to the 18th century. So yeah, like Christianity really up until like maybe 150 years ago really had a lot of spooky ooky magical things put into it. And from what I've read, the Nicene Creed, like the Congress of Nicaea and all that stuff, they kind of got rid of a lot of the more pagan things to streamline it to like, we support Jesus and Mary and the saints, and let's not get into some of the weirder esoteric parts, which is always why, like, when you're seeing like a movie about exorcisms or demons and they bring in like Catholicism dudes, and it's always like, this guy only talks about the small parts of Christianity that no one wants to really deal with, that kind of shit. Because, they got rid of it to streamline it to make more money, basically. And also to not have it deal with the more magical properties of Christianity. Even though, Christianity's built around the fact that a dude died and then came back to life 3 days later and then floated up in the air into heaven. But, this is still before that kind of stuff is swept under the rug and gotten rid of. So what are the sin eaters? Academic study of the phenomenon of sin eaters has been minimal, despite the curious sociological issue that they constitute. A sin eater was effectively a person who performed a ritual over an individual to consume or absorb their sins so that that person would not be punished for them in the afterlife. So basically, they're taking the sins of the dead person and letting them get on with it. Typically, this occurred as part of the process of burying a person, as there was no need to absolve a person of their sins at the point of death, so that they would not end up going to hell. There was a need. So, from what I've read, a lot of it was if a person died suddenly or was killed or murdered, they didn't have a chance to confess their sins to a priest. And that's how a lot of Christianity and definitely Catholicism works. You could fucking be the worst person ever, and then 10 minutes before you peace out, say, forgive me, Father, I've sinned. This is my final confession. They absolve you. You're free to go. You go to heaven, no matter what you did, because you were absolved. You repented. Pretty weird. And a lot of people take that as a, like, I'm going to fucking be a monster for my whole life as long as I got a priest on the phone. And they do that. But sometimes, the priest isn't there because a baseball flew and hit you in the temple after, the kids around the corner hit a home run. Didn't see it coming. You're dead. And you're going to go to hell unless you have a sin eater or your family knows a sin eater in the neighborhood to come and eat your sins. So typically this occurred as part. However, the documented evidence of sin eating is generally restricted to the 16th and 17th century, when we know that it occurred in parts of Western Europe, particularly in Wales and parts of England, because it was believed that the concept of sin eating dates to the medieval period, during a time when there was still, the magical belief and the occult part still was there. So it was spread around, and it started within the medieval period, but where people really found the papers and the receipts for sin eaters actually being a thing, even though they think it went back a couple hundred years before that. One text in particular provides an extensive account of sin eating. This was found in the passages of Remains of Gentilism and Judaism, a work authored by a man called John Aubrey, an English antiquarian, author, and natural philosopher of the second half of the 17th century. This guy sounds like he would... See, this is the movie, right? John Aubrey is the guy who's going around England in the late 17th century and experiencing sin eating and writing it out. Like he's going to write this book, and then shit starts going wonky. I have this story in my head, and I'm sure somebody's probably already written this, but it would be really cool because what we're about to get into is pretty weird. So in his work, Aubrey detailed the process of sin eating in early modern Britain in the context of exploring various funerary practices, which is still pertained in Wales and other regions of the British Triple Monarchy. Here he explains that in some regions of the Channel Islands and in Wales, quote, when a corpse is brought out of doors, there's a cake and cheese and a new bowl of beer and another of, well, I'm just going to use this. I know he doesn't speak like this, but it's just funny. And another of milk with ye anno domini, which is the year of the thing happening, engraved on it, and ye's party's name deceased, which one accepts of on the other side of ye corpse. And this custom is used to this day, 1686, in North Wales. So I know he doesn't sound like that, but that part is creepy because when the corpse is brought out, it just kind of works, right? He probably sounds like, I don't know, Keanu Reeves trying to do an English accent like he's in Dracula again or something. Or Guy Pearce, maybe. I don't know. He then expanded further in a later passage, specifically headed sin eaters. He then stated, in the country of Hereford was an old custom at funerals to hire poor people who were to take upon them all the sins of the party deceased. One of them, I remember, lived in a cottage on Ross Highway. He was a long, lean, ugly, lamentable poor rascal. The manner with that he went to the corpse was brought out of the house and laid on a bier. A loaf of bread was brought out and delivered to the sin eater over the corpse, as also of mazer bowl of maple, full of beer, which he was then to drink up, and 6 pence in money, in consideration whereof he took upon him, ipso facto, all of the sins of the defunct, and freed him, or her, of walking after they were dead. So what he's saying is he saw this happen where, this creature, this sin eater, this long, lean, ugly, lamentable, poor rascal, basically eats food over the corpse. They bring him out a bowl of beer, a wooden bowl full of beer that he drinks, and then he eats bread with it. And sort of how, a priest makes, the host that he transubstantiates into the body and blood of Jesus Christ, they are ipso facto making this beer and this bread into the sins. They're filling it full of the sins of this dead person. And then that sin eater is taking that into their body and taking it away from the dead person's soul. So then they won't have to roam the woods for the rest of their dead life. Pretty heavy shit. The bad thing is, a lot of the times from some of the things that I was reading was that the payment was terrible. They got this guy got 6 pence. A lot of times it was half a shilling, which was no more than like a couple dollars, if you accounted inflation. But even worse, there was a social stigma stemming from this line of work. And mostly these are, as the guy said, it was a pretty bad off looking dude. These are really poor people that were just like, yeah, give me money and food. Sure. I'll fucking take your sins in. And they probably believed it. A lot of these people believe this stuff. So the more sins that these people ate, the more that they thought that they were unworthy of being talked to or like interacting with within society, because these people were literally full of sin. Sin eaters also came under church scrutiny, since the sin eater did not have an affiliation with any of the local churches. This was just like a service that they provided, not endorsed by any of the local denominations. The sin eaters willfully carried all the sins of the deceased for the rest of their mortal lives, going against the teachings of many of the Christianity sects that were active in the 18th and 19th century. It's pretty crazy, because all they had to do, like, I guess they weren't Catholic, because then they could have gone to a Catholic priest and then absolved themselves. I guess maybe absolving themselves of the other sins that they got. So pretty fucking wild. So there we have a detailed, what I just discussed in a really bad accent, a description of how sin eaters in the early modern British society were actually presented with food and drink, which acted symbolically as a way of absorbing the sins of the deceased at their funeral. The sin eaters were paid to do so. And Aubrey also provided details of how the concept of sin eating was derived from the book of Leviticus in the Old Testament. In this, the prophet Aaron had absorbed all the quote-unquote iniquities of the children of Israel from a goat and then rendered them largely obsolete. Other things that I had read had to do with, the practice of sin eating could be seen as a macabre and misguided take on a Jewish tradition, where Jewish priests would use a goat as a physical manifestation of the sins of the Jewish people, and then release the goat into the wilderness during Yom Kippur, which is pretty wild. As such, from all this, one can obtain the understanding that sin eating was a folk element of Christianity that survived the pagan times and maybe came from some of the Jewish mysticism stuff. But they think a lot of it now, that a lot of pagan, hidden pagan like documents and stuff have come to light, that they think it came from that. It continued to be used sporadically in many parts of Europe for centuries, but it wasn't well documented during this early period, the medieval period. But this situation changed during the early modern period, when the combination of a greater level of documentation of folklore practices, such as sin eating, and the increased emphasis on habits such as sin eating, which had some vague doctrinal basis on the Old Testament, made it popular for a time in regions such as Wales and Western England. But like all fun things, ultimately, this was a largely fleeting development. Sin eating didn't stick around too long. And while sin eating was still a feature of religious life in a few communities within regions like Bavaria and some southern Germany, down to the early 20th century, the advent of the scientific revolution and the decline of religious fervor during the Enlightenment of the 18th century largely saw the practices of sin eating die out in most areas, which is a shame, because it's pretty fun, and I really like the idea of a sin eater, because in the selflessness of a sin eater, or the like, I guess, base like need for food and drink, and I guess just a little bit of money to get them through. Like, you're willing to debase yourself and take on someone else's horrific deeds throughout their life. It's very dramatic. It would make a great movie. And like, okay, so in my mind, the movie would be, there's this person who takes on the sins of others, and throughout their life, the sins that they've accumulated kind of makes them Highlander-ish, and they don't die, and throughout their life, many lifetimes, they amass fortune but also just become one of the most evil people, just like an evil Russian doll, filled and filled and filled with the sins of people throughout time. And then they've got to ultimately find their own closures. But some, maybe a priestess finds them and sorts them out and, battles them throughout over decades, like something like that. Sounds cool to me. But, sin eating is pretty fucking wild. Like, to be able to do that, and I'm sure this was like a thing where the family took out the fucking body, put out the bowl, put out the bread, and everybody just fucked off and I'm sure it wasn't a happy thing. It wasn't a wake thing. And it probably wasn't until the body was cleared of the sins that they then were allowed to bury it and then go on with their celebration of life and services and hoping they got into heaven. So yeah, fucking sin eating. Pretty weird, huh? Yeah, so there you go. If you have any other, if any of you know more about this, point me in a direction, because I'm going to be reading about this for the next couple days. I've been reading about it for a couple days, and I've integrated a couple articles and things that I've read about, and I'm really fascinated by it. And now I want to watch all these terrible horror movies and find out really what the life of it seems like sin eaters were pretty poor and willing to debase themselves to get free food and drink. And, by the way, there appears to be no accounts of cannibalism. They literally just ate bread and beer that was transubstantiated into the physical embodiment of that dead person's sins. Just to let you know, there's no eating of the dead person, which would be fucking crazy. And I'm sure that's a thing. And what's even crazier is, somewhere in this fucking world, this shit's still going on. I guarantee you it is. It's amazing. It's pretty fucking creepy and a really wild way to deal with death and the fear of the person that you love not going to heaven, and also the socioeconomic issues of all right, let's fucking just pay this poor person to make sure that Pop here gets to go to fucking heaven, so when I die, we'll be hanging out in the pearly gates. Who gives a shit about this poor person? There's a whole bunch of that too. Wild shit. Something to think about. But if you know more about it, get in touch with me through our Facebook group or rudecookingskool@gmail.com. That would be fucking super cool. If you know more than I do, which I'm sure fucking 99.9% of you people listening know more than me, get in touch with me and let me know what you think. Okay? So there you have it. Thank you for listening to the Rude Cooking School podcast. Please rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts, wherever you're listening right now. All you got to do is give us 5 stars or, review us, say a couple good words about us. We don't advertise, so word of mouth is how we get out there. And, just to throw a couple stars our way, or just like it on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us right now. It does make a difference, and it brings a lot of people in, and it shows people through their algorithm hey, you might like this because you like that. So the more that you guys help us, the more it gets to other people, or also just, tell somebody, tell your friend, tell your coworker, oh, I like cooking. Yeah. Check this podcast out. It's really interesting. It's really weird. They talk about normal stuff. They talk about fucking sin eaters. So, if you got a creepy goth kid that's in your office that really likes, cooking, this one might be perfectly suited for him. So with that, thank you so much for listening to the Rude Cooking School podcast. I will see you next week. And until then, I'm John Hauser III. Don't yuck my yum, garbage everything, and I will see you guys next week. Peace.